A few nights ago, after everyone had finally gone to bed, I found myself standing in the kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of a very ordinary day. Half-packed lunches, crumbs on the counter, water bottles waiting to be washed, the quiet hum of the dishwasher. And underneath all of it, this familiar feeling I think so many mothers in recovery carry. I am holding so much inside me that no one else can see. I think many of us have spent years trying to become well enough privately before letting anyone see how hard it still feels, trying to get far enough along that we no longer need support, or trying to hold the food fears, the body shame, the parenting worries, and the guilt somewhere inside us where no one else has to see. Hi, friend. I'm really glad you're here. And before we go anywhere else, I want to invite you into one small exhale, not because you have to be calm, not because you need to be in the right headspace, not because you need to do anything perfectly while listening, just a small moment to arrive, a small moment to let yourself be here. Over the past two audios, we've been talking about why motherhood can make recovery louder and why knowing better doesn't always help in the moment. We've been naming the gap so many mothers in recovery live inside, the gap between what we know and what we feel, the gap between what we believe and what gets activated, the gap between the mother we want to be and the parts of us still trying to protect. And today, I want to talk about what kind of support actually helps in that gap. Not support that gives us more pressure, not support that asks us to perform recovery perfectly, not support that piles more information on top of an already overwhelmed nervous system, but support that helps us feel less alone inside the places we've been trying so hard to hide. Because I think many of us have spent years trying to heal quietly, privately, carefully, trying to become better before anyone sees how hard it still is, trying to get far enough along that we no longer need help, trying to hold the food fears, the body shame, the parenting worries, the relapse fears, the guilt, the grief, and the invisible load of motherhood somewhere inside us where no one else has to see. And for a while, we may be able to do just that. We may be able to keep functioning, keep making the meals, keep showing up at pickup, keep answering the questions, keep packing the snacks, keep smiling when someone asks how we are. We may even tell ourselves, I'm okay. I'm just tired. This is just motherhood. Other people have it harder. I should be able to handle this by now. But something happens when we carry shame alone for too long. It gets heavier, it gets louder. It starts to shape how we see ourselves. It tells us that needing support means we're failing. It tells us that if anyone really knew how hard this still was, they would think less of us. It tells us that we have to be more recovered, more regulated, more together, more certain before we are allowed to be seen. And this is a part of what keeps so many mothers in recovery isolated, not because we don't want support, but because feeling seen or being seen can feel dangerous. Because what if we say the hard thing out loud and someone doesn't understand? Or what if we admit that our child's appetite scared us? What if we say that postpartum hunger felt terrifying? What if we confess that we reacted at dinner again? What if we admit that sometimes we don't know where the line is between protecting our child and projecting our fear? What if we bring the part of us that still feels messy ambivalent, scared, or shamed. And it is too much. I think that fear makes so much sense because many of us have learned to survive by being careful, careful with our needs, careful with our hunger, careful with our bodies, careful with our emotions, and how much of ourselves we let other people see. And so the idea of support can sound beautiful, but also terrifying because part of us wants to be held and part of us wants to hide. Part of us wants connection, and part of us worries that connection will ask too much from us. Part of us longs to hear, me too. And part of us is afraid of what might happen if we tell the truth. So, when I talk about support, I don't mean a place where you have to spill everything before you feel ready. I don't mean a place where you have to share perfectly. I don't mean a place where you have to be the most healed version of yourself in order to belong. I mean a place where you can arrive exactly as you are. Quiet if you need to be quiet, tender if you feel tender, messy if things feel messy, still unsure, still scared, still learning, still in process. A place where you don't have to translate the overlap, where you don't have to explain why feeding your child can touch your own food wounds, where you don't have to justify why a comment from the pediatrician stayed with you all week, where you don't have to pretend that the old thoughts are gone just because you're a mother now, where you can say, I reacted again. I felt the old urge. I don't know where the line is. I'm scared of passing this on. I thought I was past this. I'm growing, but I'm still struggling. And instead of being met with shock, correction, or shame, you are met with gentleness, with curiosity, with that makes sense, with you're not the only one, with let's slow down here, with what got touched. What might this part of you be trying to protect? And with you don't have to figure this out alone. That is the kind of support I didn't know I needed. Not because it fixed everything immediately, not because someone handed me the perfect answer, not because I suddenly stopped getting activated, but because being safely witnessed changed the way I related to what was happening inside me. Before, every hard moment felt like evidence against me, evidence that I was failing, evidence that I wasn't strong enough, evidence that I should be further along, evidence that maybe I was becoming the thing I was trying not to become. But when I could bring those moments into a space where they were met with care instead of judgment, something started to soften. That shame didn't have as much room to grow. The critic didn't have to be the only voice in the room. The scared part of me didn't have to work so hard to protect alone. And I started to experience something different, not perfection, not instant freedom, but a little more space. Enough space to notice, enough space to repair, enough space to come back and ask, what happened here? What got touched? What does this part of me need? What would help me respond from the mother I am becoming, not only from the wound I'm carrying? And I think that is one of the most powerful things about support that is rooted in compassion. It doesn't shame us into changing. It helps us feel safe enough to practice something new because many of us already know what we want to do differently. We want to trust our children's bodies. We want to stop micromanaging food. We want to respond instead of react. We want to repair after hard moments. We want to speak to ourselves with more care. We want to stop disappearing inside the struggle. And we want to raise children who feel safe in their bodies while we are still learning to feel safe in ours. But knowing what we want isn't always the same as feeling supported enough to practice it, especially when life is loud, when the baby is crying, when dinner is refused, when your child asks for more, when your body changes, when the comment lands, when the old fear rises, when your own needs feel inconvenient, when you are exhausted, overstimulated, and already carrying too much. This is why support in the messy middle has to meet real life, not just a version of recovery that happens when the house is quiet, not just the version of healing that happens when we have time to journal, breathe, process, or reflect, but the version that happens in kitchens, in cars, at the table, in the pediatrician's office, at birthday parties, during bedtime, in the moment after we said the thing we wish we hadn't said. Support that helps us come back, support that helps us repair, support that helps us remember that the hard moment is not the whole story, support that helps us see growth and struggle existing at the same time, because that is so often what healing actually looks like. A mother who is still triggered and still trying. A mother who reacts sometimes and repairs. A mother who carries grief and keeps showing up. A mother who has old patterns and is learning new ways. A mother who isn't fully free and not where she once was. A mother who is growing and struggling at the same time. And I want you to know that is not failure. That is honesty. And honest healing is often where something new can begin because support doesn't erase the messy middle. It helps us stop being alone inside it. It gives us a place to bring the parts of us we thought we had to hide. It reminds us that the part of us still reaching for control may not be bad. It might be scared. The part of us that panics around our child's appetite may not be trying to harm, it may be trying to prevent pain. The part of us that gets loud after we react may not be cruel for no reason. It may actually be terrified of repeating the cycle. And when those parts can be met with care, not just criticism, something begins to change. They may not have to shout as loudly. They may not have to grip as tightly. They may begin to trust that there is another way. And this is why I believe so deeply in healing alongside other mothers who understand this overlap. Because there is something powerful about being in a space where someone else can say, I know exactly how you got from point A to point F, where you don't have to explain why food, body, safety, and motherhood all tangled together, where you can bring the thing that felt too much to say anywhere else. And instead of being looked at like you are irrational, you are understood as someone carrying a story, a wound, a protective pattern, a deep love for your child, and a longing to do this differently. The kind of being seen can become a form of repair, not because another person can heal it for you, but because healing often requires experiences that contradict shame. Shame says, hide this. Support says, this can be held. Shame says, you're the only one. Support says, there are other mothers here. Shame says, you should be past this. Support says, you're allowed to be in process. Shame says, you have to fix yourself before you belong. Support says you belong while you are healing. And I wonder what might soften in us if we heard that enough times, if we experienced that enough times, if we practiced bringing the hidden thing into the light and discovering that it didn't make us too much, that it didn't make us unsafe to love, that it did not disqualify us from being good mothers, that it simply showed us where more care was needed. That is the kind of support I want more mothers in recovery to experience. Support that doesn't rush them out of their pain, support that doesn't ask them to perform healing, support that doesn't treat their eating disorder as a villain to defeat, but helps them understand what it has been trying to protect. Support that can sit with grief, support that can hold complexity, support that can say, yes, this is hard. Yes, this makes sense. Yes, you are still responsible for repair. And no, you do not have to carry the shame alone. Because support is not about being rescued, it's about being accompanied. It's about having somewhere to return when the hard moments happen, somewhere to practice telling the truth, somewhere to be reminded of who you are becoming, somewhere to let the messy middle be held with compassion. And if these audios have been naming something that has felt tender for you, if you have found yourself thinking, I didn't know anyone else felt this way, if you've been carrying this quietly while showing up for everyone else, I want you to know that I'll be sharing more soon about a space I created for this exact overlap. A space for mothers like us in eating disorder recovery who are navigating the messy middle. A space where we can practice bringing compassion to the parts of us that get activated. A space where we can be supported in real life, not just in theory. A space where growth and struggle can both belong. And a space where we don't have to do this alone anymore. And for today, I hope you can carry this with you. The support you need doesn't have to add more pressure. It can help you exhale. It can help you feel steadied. It can help you come back to yourself with more compassion. And maybe that is part of healing too, not becoming perfectly unaffected, not finally earning support once you are better enough, but letting yourself be accompanied while you are still becoming, letting the messy middle be held with more care, letting yourself stop carrying so much of this alone. I just want you to know that I am here with you and I'll be sharing more soon.